Right, 25 September 2023, and the year is almost coming to an end, and it's been a very, very eventful year. 2023, one of those years that we've all been looking forward to, and we are here in 2023 after the elections. A lot is happening in Zimbabwe, and a lot is just about to happen in Zimbabwe. The topic that I want to deal with today is regarding the Zimbabwe military salaries, and this is something that has become a matter of concern. And if you are talking of the military, you're obviously talking of the Zimbabwe National Army, the Air Force of Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe Republic Police, the Zimbabwe Prison Service, the Zimbabwe Intelligence, and the Zimbabwe Reserve Force. Also, you're speaking of the Presidential Guard. So that is the Zimbabwe military in totality, which has got between 30,000 and 50,000 people. So the Zimbabwe National Army was a pride of Africa. Previously, a soldier in Zimbabwe, a junior soldier, was earning between $400 and $700. And this was probably the highest salary in Southern Africa. If you compare to other countries, like Botswana, a junior soldier was earning something like 3,000 pula. And if you look at a country like Zambia, a junior soldier was earning about 1,000 rands. Here in South Africa, a junior soldier earns about $5,000 average, and a senior soldier earns between 25,000 and 45,000. If you look at Namibia, it's almost the same. But Zimbabwe was historically the highest paying country for the military. So a junior soldier, as I said, was earning between $400 and $700. And a senior soldier would earn between $1,000, which is an officer, between $1,000 and $2,500. However, right now, a Zimbabwean soldier is earning $75, and an officer or someone who is an officer in the army can earn anything between $150 and $300. That is how bad the situation has become in Zimbabwe, and this has worsened over the past few months. The Zimbabwe dollar has crashed in value starting around January 2023, just before the elections. The value of the Zimbabwe dollar has plummeted, and the soldiers in Zimbabwe are basically struggling. And I'm not only talking here of soldiers, I'm also talking of all the guys that I've been talking about here. That is intelligence, Zimbabwe Republic Police. All these guys are earning meager salaries that can even support their families. And in terms of benefits, so if you look at other armies around Africa, they've got massive benefits. That is salary and allowances, healthcare, housing, education, training and skills, retirement, travel benefits. It's massive. Being in the army in other countries is an amazing opportunity. You get to do things that you can normally not do if you're not in the military. For example, if you are in armies like in the United States, I've got friends who are engineers, and they deal with different types of equipment. You operate the latest technology, and you're part of research. You're part of, for example, when there are drones, new drones are introduced, you're part of that. The problem with the Zimbabwe military is they've got aging infrastructure. They're unable to train the engineers anywhere else except in countries like China and probably Cuba and Russia. And those opportunities are not there as we speak right now because of the geopolitical issues that are happening in these countries. So a Zimbabwean soldier, especially the juniors, they've got nothing to be proud of in terms of the country, in terms of being saving their country. And also in terms of benefits, they've got nothing. And this goes to issues like housing. The Zimbabwe national government has been very, very negligent of the people in security structures. Because let me explain to you how easy it is for the Zimbabwe government to deal with the needs of the soldiers. Take, for example, land. They've been giving out land to different people, but there has been no program for providing housing to soldiers. So you've got only 30,000 soldiers and you've got 10 provinces. That means all you need to do is to say, all my 30,000 soldiers are coming from one of these 10 provinces. I'm going to give them a piece of land. So that means 3,000 soldiers will get stands in each of the 10 provinces of Zimbabwe. That is, if you're coming from Matabeleland South, if you're coming from Mashonaland, if you're coming, you get a farm there. When I was in Zimbabwe a few weeks back, the soldiers in Bulawayo have invaded, the police, they've invaded a farm and they've given each other pieces of land, in a piece of land that used to belong to one of the MPs, the MDC MPs in Bulawayo. They've invaded this farm because there's no formal program of the government. So a soldier, basically, when he finishes whatever he's doing or his work as a soldier, he goes back to the village and he becomes a destitute. This is the current situation, and that is the truth of the situation. You know that during the War of Liberation, the guys who fought in the National Army, the guys who were liberation fighters, they were never taken care of. And this is the similar situation that we have now. And I don't understand why a military government like we have in ZANU-PF does not understand that paying a soldier $75 and paying an officer $150 is actually a crazy, crazy thing to do. It's in fact, to me, a national security threat, and it's something that they need to address very, very quickly. And then today, I don't want to take a long time. This is a pretty straightforward topic. The Zimbabwe government totally failing to take care of the guys in security services, the guys in the army. I've been talking to a lot of guys, and it's heartbreaking for someone to say, I'm earning $75. If you come here to South Africa, the domestic workers, their minimum wage, I think it's now like 3,000, and they get free accommodation, they get to eat where they stay. A soldier, I think they now have to go and eat at work if they want to survive on this $75, let alone school fees, thinking about investment. Like I said, the issue doesn't end on salaries. It also expands to what you do for these guys. For example, this issue of land, if you give your soldiers land, if you give them access to pieces of agricultural land which they can actually use or build their houses on, at least they have something to use. If you give them opportunities and if you upgrade the equipment that you have in the National Army, not what they have now in the Zimbabwe National Army, it's an embarrassment. And I think this goes back to the structure of the military and the modernization. Many, many things in Zimbabwe are not modernized. They're so archaic and they're old and backdated. When I walk into a government building in Zimbabwe, I'm often surprised. There is just too much protocol and not much happening. There is a need there to modernize many facets of the Zimbabwean government, especially when it comes to making sure that the people who work in the civil service, they get proper salaries, they're well taken care of, and they're actually working. It's very rare to find someone in the civil service who is not corrupt, who is driving a car. I've seen young soldiers when I go to Zimbabwe, they're sitting there, they're saying, "Nkoma, give us some water, give us some bread." And this is not something that you normally used to see happening with our soldiers, especially the common soldiers. And it's even worse when it comes to police. And as you move away from the main centers where there's a lot of activities, it becomes very, very sad to see the situation. But of course, I want to handle the issue of, will this result in maybe a coup or a problem with the military? And I say the Zimbabwe military is pretty disciplined. The guys who are in the military, they are very, very well disciplined. But I think we're getting to a point now where it's becoming quite a problem. When you pay someone $75, an adult, $75 is not even enough for 2 petrol tanks. For the guys who stay here in South Africa, you understand that myself, if I put 500 rands of petrol in a car, it will take me 200 kilometers, and that's it. What about someone who has to feed a family, someone who has to take care of their own future? That's extremely crazy. And this all goes down to the management of the economy. The Zimbabwean economy is in shambles. And this is a big challenge for President Mnangagwa. He has to address this situation. The situation in Zimbabwe right now is not normal. And the guys should not deceive themselves to say if they've won the election and they've declared themselves and they've inaugurated themselves, then everything's okay. We are at a very, very critical point right now in Zimbabwe. Anything could happen within the next few months because people are just living in a difficult way. Everything is on edge, and this needs to be normalized. And as I say, my solution to this, my proposed solution to this is internal dialogue. Everyone has to talk, and the situation has to be addressed. There should be a contract among Zimbabweans that they must not affect the economy because young people are hurting. Young soldiers, young intelligence officers, young people in prison service, presidential guard, guys are suffering. They are literally living in abject poverty. They don't have anything to eat. They can't plan their futures. And worse, the guys who are in leadership in these institutions, they are not thinking of how they can mitigate this situation. If the salary is low, come up with better benefits. Motivate these guys with better training, get better equipment. And this is something that is almost a forgotten conclusion in other places. Like I was showing this weekend, I was going around Cape Town and I filmed the number of submarines going around here. I think it would be a dream for a Zimbabwean soldier to operate one of these submarines. And yet here, young soldiers are doing that. So I was in Caribbean and I was laughing. There was a little boat, and that's all these guys have got. They've got a little boat that they use to patrol the waters. I'm sure I will share one of the videos on the other days. And this is something that the military in Zimbabwe need to think about, to modernize the military, to pay better salaries, not only for the soldiers, but for everyone else. So I'm sure the young soldiers, they understand ideologically where they stand. But in terms of reality on the ground, the situation and their way of living is very, very bad. And the Zimbabwe government needs to address this issue as a matter of urgency. You cannot have what is happening now in the Zimbabwe army, $75 salary, and then 150 for officers. That's crazy. Now let's look at some comments. 175 Kupiko, usatere uyo. Okay, I don't understand what you're saying, bro. I don't know. My Shona is not that deep, but I know that $175, that's what an officer is getting. $75, that's what a normal, ordinary soldier is getting. But remember, you have to pay rent. You have to plan for your future. You have to pay school fees. Minimum, a Zimbabwe soldier should be earning $700, the juniors, because the country was there before. What happened to move from 700 to 175 to 75? Something must be explained there. Why is the salary now so low for the soldiers? Then Toti is saying the soldier in Botswana now earn 8,000 pula, right? I think that is correct. The information I have is from like 3 or 4 years back, but I know that an officer in Botswana earns 20,000 pula. They probably have a lot of vehicles. They've got proper looking uniform. They live in a proper and professional environment. If you look at Zimbabwe media, we filmed the Defense Forces celebrations in Botswana, and you see that the equipment that they're operating there is quite of high standard. Similarly, as I said, South Africa has got high standard equipment. The Zimbabwean guys, they do not have access to any meaningful equipment. All they have are those ugly looking cars. And if you go to the university, I don't think the university has been upgraded to what it should have been. I passed by there like 3 or 4 months ago, and it looks like it's a bit deserted. I don't know what's happening there, but the the Zimbabwe army is just behind. That is the truth. If you were to go into combat right now, and you are not combating the Mozambicans and the guys who are old, who are using old equipment, you stand no chance. You need a better military there, and you need to do better than $75. You need to do better than $175 for an officer. You need to do better, especially for the young guys. After they finish work, they need to get home. So what is 5,000 for each soldier to buy a car? And you guys have got lots of engineers there in the army who can fix cars. I think the benefit side of issues, that is where the problem is. The guys have just been lax. The leadership there, the generals, they've been lax. Think harder about how you can motivate these guys. If you cannot pay if you cannot pay $500 to $700 for the juniors, do the benefits. Like I said, give them each a piece of land which they can irrigate, where they can build their house, give them title deeds. How many soldiers are there every year? There are very few. I think in Balawala, they take what, 200 people a year? That's not a lot. Right, so let's wrap this up. And then tomorrow, I want us to look at the 7 or 8 coups that have taken place in Africa, that is in Northern Africa. The Corporate Governance Institute, is it the Corporate Governance, CGA, I don't know what it stands for, but they have released a report on the coups. And Chris, you forgive me if I'm butchering the name of your organization here. So they've produced a report on the 7 coups and what has happened. So I think I'll get some chance to look at them. The military is very, very important, especially now where we're going. It's very, very important. But the way that it's being handled, the position of a junior officer is very interesting. Many armies don't understand what a junior officer is and what they can do. If I go to certain different countries, I see a total neglect of the lower levels. And some of these coups are being caused by disgruntled soldiers coming from one country going to another. Right, so I think I'm getting some calls when I'm live. I don't know what happened today. I need to get a new phone, guys. Right, so that is it. Crazy situation taking place in Zimbabwe. Terrible situation for everyone on the ground. If you're in Zimbabwe right now, you're feeling the pain. The economy is screaming, and people need to take responsibility in the opposition and people in government. We will not stop talking about this. President Mnangagwa is primarily responsible. He needs to make sure that there's negotiations with the opposition, and that opposition should result in stability. At the moment, there's no stability. There's too much noise, and the noise is affecting the economy. We need President Mnangagwa to deal with the failure of people to make money. People cannot make money in Zimbabwe, and this needs to be addressed. And we need to keep addressing this issue. If people are close to President Mnangagwa, they need to talk to him. Ever since the days of Mugabe, the biggest problem in Zimbabwe has been that currency that collapses every 5 years. Young people cannot plan. There is no cash in the ATM. That's abnormal. There's no country where I go to where there's no cash in the ATM. People cannot get a loan to buy anything because the bank is saying in 6 months' time that man will be worth nothing. The guys in Zimbabwe need to sit down and talk and address the situation. The situation I'm talking about here, young soldiers earning $75. It's not only young soldiers. It's everybody. The civil service is a problem. I have gone to government offices, and the way the guys were dressed there, you see that they're basically wearing the last shirt on their back. And this is a terrible, terrible situation. I've seen people trying to sell sweets and buns from the offices just to try to make a living. And this is not appropriate. I remember the situation that was there at the Mukwati building, at the passport offices there. It was terrible. You know, a few years back when I went there, guys trying to supplement their income in ways that you cannot imagine. This is because the salaries in the civil services are so bad. and they need to be addressed. Now let's look at the last comment. I need to go now. And by the way, it's been hectic here. The weather is terrible. There is a lot of flooding around me, and I haven't been able to move around today. Come back, you need to investigate the news about ZANU trying to reach out to CCC for GNU before SADC. Baba D. Chirandu, let me explain something to you. SADC Troika can happen. Right, so listen very, very carefully to what I'm going to tell you now. The solution cannot come from outsiders. So SADC Troika cannot say Mnangagwa step down. So I think Jonas was here, he explained that. And listen very, very carefully when Jonas is talking to you. He's a very smart guy. You cannot step down. You cannot say President Mnangagwa step down. So what is going to happen is SADC Troika is going to say what President Ramaphosa said. Address the shortcomings in the electoral system. That's what they're going to say. But that doesn't mean it's the end of the story. The ZANU-PF guys must understand that the economy in Zimbabwe is at a low. People are suffering. So the solution needs to come from Zimbabwe. If I was CCC and ZANU-PF, I would sit down and address the situation internally. Have you ever seen anyone from Namibia, Zambia, Mozambique, Botswana, Lesotho, the countries I've named? Have you ever seen them after the election coming to Zimbabwe to say help us? It's because they've got a national identity. The problem that we have in Zimbabwe is we lack a national identity. You think that another person from another country is going to come and address the situation. That won't happen. That is why you continuously have disputes and you have half solutions. Because the moment the foreigners leave, you start fighting again. It's like Sudan, the guys in Sudan, you know what those guys do? Like every so often, they'll fight. And it's known. So don't be like that. Think about it very, very carefully. And I want you to understand that myself, personally, I call guys every day from both parties. And I say to them, guys, why don't you address this situation? You, as a person, if you're in ZANU-PF and the CCC, don't try to play hardball. 5 years will go by and nothing will have happened because you are brothers. And no one can ever solve a fight among brothers. And like I said, when two brothers fight, the foreigner will flee with the wealth. That is what is happening in Zimbabwe. Right, Nyasha is saying, my brother, I have two nephews. They are all soldiers. Wangu. Soldiers. I think if you try to ask your soldier for your money back, he's probably going to beat you up. But anyway, it's fine. They're my brothers, soldiers. It's tough, guys. It's not a laughing matter. $75 for a soldier and $150 for an officer. Guys, fix the situation. And the ministers, the Minister of Defense, fix that army, modernize the army. And Neo Taku Nyakunda, you're saying I always speak nonsense. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm one of the generals, because I'm sure if you're a general, you won't end 150 and end there. You end 150, then when it's come to procurement time, you make sure that you get 150,000, and then you are sorted. Because the houses that your generals are staying in, obviously, they are paid for, they are guarded, you've got free food, you've got free cooks. That is what the generals get. But the young soldiers, what do they get? They get nothing. And then in terms of Troika, there's nothing, my brother. Don't look forward to SADC or anything. Eventually, mark my word, and look directly at me when I talk to you like this. If you don't find a solution in Zimbabwe, and look for it in SADC, look for it everywhere else, you are going to get a solution that is not going to make you happy. The final solution in Zimbabwe will come from us, young Zimbabweans. We have to work together. We have to make sure that our country works. And we are going there. In the future, it will be like that. Me and you are eventually going to understand that what we're doing, our actions and our hard attitudes are what is making Zimbabwe an evil country. Guys, let these people sit together and talk. ED and Chamisa, they need to sit down and talk. Don't encourage these guys to take these hard positions. Guys in ZANU-PF, don't encourage it to take hard position. Guys in CCC, don't encourage Chamisa to take hard position. These guys must talk and sit down, quickly resolve this situation, and let's move on. We can't have another 5 years of Chamisa saying Majigi Zango and Mnangagwa saying sovereignty. No one eats those words. Mnangagwa is busy at the United Nations saying sovereignty, and Chamisa is busy around the country saying he wants a transitional authority. Those things won't work. People have to work together, and someone has to sit down and bring these two together. There is need to talk now because we're in trouble. And young soldiers will understand this. $75, that's your salary for a month. My internet connection here costs more than that. So we need to make our country work, and we need to have all our young people doing well and with a future. That is it for tonight. And I really thank you all for watching here and for the appreciation. And I know that all my brothers in the barracks and in the intelligence and in presidential guard will be watching this very, very closely. And before I go, I want to tell you a story. When I finished A-level, that was in 1997, 1995. I was actually invited to join first Air Zimbabwe and second the Air Force of Zimbabwe. So by now I was going to be one hell of a general if I had accepted the offer but the thought of running, man, I just couldn't do it. But one of my friends went there, a very nice guy, and we stayed friends for a very, very long time. And I still have a lot of friends in the Zimbabwe military, but it's bad what's happening. Especially, I want to emphasize benefits. If you can't pay better salaries, think of something, be creative. You guys in the army, the leadership in the army, do something for these guys and don't make them struggle so much to the point of asking for a bottle of water. That means they basically have nothing to eat. All right, so that is it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow handling other topics. Thank you very much and good night.
Mama wanna get it, I know food I miss, I know food I say, I know Kaya Mari. Come on, don't you come,